Now I'm going to do a quick video on how to service, grease and adjust the preload on the Dura Ace 9100 pedals. I've been using these for about 4,000 kilometers now. They've been pretty flawless, but I've just developed in the drive side pedal a bit of play in the axle, and it can be really easily taken out. The adjustment is very fine, so I'm going to show you a quick method how to do it, maybe give you a few tips. It's actually very simple to do, so let's have a look inside. Just like most Shimano SPD pedals, these use cup and cone bearings for the main load bearing, let's say, and in this pedal there's two more bearings. There's a needle bearing here and another bearing here. The only ones you can adjust is the main bearing here, basically. These two are set inside the pedal body and you can't adjust those. So the way to adjust the play or the preload in the bearing to take out any slop or play is to remove the axle. On the end of the axle is where your preload adjustment is. This nut screws in to the pedal body. This black part is fixed into the carbon reinforced plastic body. The second nut is essentially your adjuster. Now this has got a number of flats on it. The adjuster, the smaller one, only has 2 flats on it, but actually you don't need a tool for this one. You can use your fingers basically, because when the main lock nut is loose, you can adjust the preload quite easily just using your fingers. So you need to use an adjustable spanner or quite a thin spanner to get at this lock nut without interfering with the pedal body. So like I mentioned, I found that I was getting some play between the axle and the body. If I grab the axle where it would be threaded into the crank and grab the pedal body and rock it ever so slightly, there is a tiny bit of slop there. Now what you have to remember, when you're taking off this lock nut to adjust it, it's reverse. So this lock nut, when viewed like this, actually undoes clockwise. And it's quite a soft metal. It's quite a thin bit of stainless steel. If you try and force it the other way, you can round off the flats. So be very careful, and remember that the drive side one, as you're looking at it now, the lock nut undoes clockwise. Now this is arguably the most important step if you're doing this for the first time. I have marked 2 lines. This is my reference point for the preload. If you really cock it up and you don't have these 2 lines, things can get a bit tricky quite quickly. Because this thread isn't very fine, a small adjustment between these 2 adjusting rings basically manifests itself into a large range of preload or not preload. So you only have to adjust this one relative to this one ever so slightly to affect the preload quite drastically. And by marking them in line before you undo it, you set your kind of reference point, and we'll see how much or how little we have to move it just to take out that play. It's not a lot. So I've got my adjustable spanner on the flat of the big lock nut, and I'm going to release it by doing it clockwise. Right, that's got it. What you want to do is just continue unwinding it, trying to keep those 2 reference points together. It's actually easier to wind off the pedal body clockwise. There might be some loose bearings on the end of this main bearing, so do this slowly, do it over a table. Right, there we go. As you can see, this one's actually full of grease because I've already serviced it once and greased it. The end of this axle forms part of the needle roller bearing. That's basically the race for that bearing. And then all the little balls for the main bearing underneath this thread, you can't see them because at the moment it's just full of grease. Now if you do want to service them, what you want to do is wind this part all the way out, and then you can move this collar or this threaded part and all the balls will become exposed. Then you can pick them out carefully, degrease them and re-grease them. Now I'm here to set the preload and take out any play, so putting it back together, this one will thread on anti-clockwise. Right, so I'm going to do that finger tightly, and I'm just going to wiggle that, and I can still feel there's play in there. So what I need to do, back the pedal off again, and then I'm going to move these 2 adjusters relative to each other and see if I can make the play more or less, basically. So first of all I'm going to go that way, and then I'm going to screw the pedal back together, and there, that's taken out just that tiny adjustment. I mean, you can work it out, it's probably only 20 degrees of rotation. It's taken out all the play. Now you might find when you do this up really tight again with the spanner, when you torque it up really tight, that it shifts a little bit, and that's normal. I mean, you'll be used to that if you've adjusted cup and cone wheel bearings. It's exactly the same. It's kind of an iterative process, but my point was, by putting the two marks on there, you can see how little it needs to take out the preload. So when you have it apart, don't go crazy unscrewing it, because it'll take you a while just to find your starting point, and then you'll have to correct yourself. So put the marks on there before you undo it. Now if I was happy with this, what I'm going to do is slip the spanner back on, carefully doing it not to adjust the setting that I've given it, and then what I want to do is just snug that up and then check it again. Now see, I've snugged it up and it's slipped round a bit, and now the axle, you can probably see that it's very notchy, so there's too much preload on there. You know, a bike shop might say, oh, that'll wear in, but for me that's way too tight and it feels graunchy. Like I said, it's an iterative process. I'll back it off, move that inner ring slightly closer to the marker, and then try again. So now I've gone back the other way, and you can see the markers are almost back together again. Now there's still a tiny bit of play there, so I'm going to have to undo it again, go back downwards a little bit. So I finished the adjustment now. It's running pretty smoothly. There's a little bit of resistance there, but it's not notchy or graunchy. That's perfect, and there's no play in there at all. When you do the lock nut up really tight and you really torque it down, everything can change again. So you need to torque the lock nut down really tight to actually find if the preload is set correctly. It's going to go back on the bike. Now some of you will know I did switch over from Speedplay earlier this year. I was using Speedplay Zeros. I've gone back to Shimano, and if you keep on top of the maintenance, they should last you basically forever. Cheers, see you next time. Click the subscribe button if you like these type of videos, or if you've got any suggestions, let me know down below.